everybody. We're back here at AmFest 2025, and I'm really excited to be able to have this opportunity to share this interview with you with Brooke Goldstein, who leads an organization called the Lawfare Project. Brooke, thanks for coming on Truth and Liberty.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Brooke, tell me about this Lawfare Project. What is that?
So I founded the Lawfare Project in 2010. I was actually working at an organization with Daniel Pipes called the Middle East Forum prior, and I was running a litigation defense fund. And we were defending members of the counterterrorism community, members of the moderate Muslim community who were calling out radical Islam and terror front organizations, but then got sued by the very organizations that they were calling out in what we call lawfare, the use of the law as a weapon of war. And after doing that for about 3 years, I realized, why are we on the defense? Right? The truth is on our side, the law is on our side. The way we make change in healthy democracies is through impact litigation, civil rights litigation. And the Jewish community had not had any type of strategic legal offense. And Jews are being discriminated against. As you know, we have an issue of rising radicalization and rising Jew hatred and anti-Jewish discrimination and discriminating against Israeli businesses, and nobody was offering them legal support. So I founded the Lawfare Project in 2010. And since then we have grown and we have become the world's foremost Jewish civil rights litigation fund and public interest law firm. We have a network of over 1,000 now pro bono attorneys in 37 major law firms that we have worked with, and have filed over 200 cases. And the goal is to uphold the civil rights of the Jewish community as a minority community, deserved of equal protection under the law. So that's what we do.
Wow. So, lawfare, the word itself, I'm an attorney, but I had never really heard that word until all of the stuff that was unleashed against Donald Trump, and they started using that word in the media. But your organization's quite a bit older than that.
Right, and it's not just against political opponents. I mean, we see it against states as well. Obviously, Israel is a victim of a lawfare attack, whether it's in these international courts, the ICC or the ICJ, or the various war crimes charges being filed against Israeli officials for their war against terror, to the point where Netanyahu can't even land, or Ariel Sharon couldn't land in England, and an ally for fear of an arrest warrant, while Hamas and Hezbollah cross European borders with impunity. So it's really the manipulation of international legal systems against democracies so they cannot fight on the asymmetric battlefield against terrorist groups. And then you have lawfare against free speech, which is actually what I wrote my first book about, which is about the filing of frivolous lawsuits against people who exercise their First Amendment right to free speech about issues of national security, national concern, and our national security, in particular radical Islam, who are then sued by the very terror front organizations that they're trying to expose. So we've had a couple of those lawsuits as well.
Well, and of course, since the October 7th attacks, we have seen just a shocking rise in anti-Semitism on college campuses in America. And initially the world sort of voiced support for Israel, but it soon evaporated and even flipped to where now it seems like the whole world is united against Israel. On our college campuses, though, can you speak to that? I think you told me you are defending the rights of Jewish students, moderate Arabs, and others on college campuses. What's going on?
So we talk a lot about rising anti-Semitism, but I have to warn against that, because what we're seeing is rising radicalization, rising anti-Americanism, rising pro-terror ideology, and of course what comes with that is Jew hatred. But when we continue to talk about what's happening in our campuses as just a Jewish problem, I think we're missing the picture, because if you look at what they're teaching in the DEI departments that are funded by Qatar, if you look at what they're teaching in the Middle Eastern study departments, it's Islamism. And it's the subversive element that is coming into our country and pitting people against each other and using the Jews as the scapegoat, which is this, medieval tactic. And one of the most important lawsuits that we have going on right now is our lawsuit against Carnegie Mellon University. Carnegie Mellon University is the third largest recipient of funds from Qatar. Qatar is the #1 state sponsor of Hamas, a designated terrorist group. Qatar hosts Hamas officials currently. They provide them with safe harbor and they foment instability, terrorism all over the world. So what is Qatar doing funding our campuses? Why is Qatar funding curriculum in our K through 12 schools? That is a huge part of why we are seeing rising radicalization. And studies have shown that where Qatari funding comes into the campus, there's over 300% rise in radicalization and anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism. This to me is a huge national security threat that I believe our lawmakers need to get a hold of. We need to close the loopholes in the law. The law currently just has minimal reporting requirements, and it's not just Qatar, it's China, it's Russia, and they're creating a stealth campaign to really undermine America from within. So back to October the 7th, when people like me have been talking like this, about this stuff for the last 15 years, we've been accused of being Islamophobic or anti-Muslim, and people have tried to intimidate us into silence. And then all of a sudden, everybody wakes up, by the way, for the second time, because we woke up on 9/11, and then there was a coordinated campaign by Muslim Brotherhood front groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations to shut down free speech about the threat of radical Islam, and we were all too scared to talk about it. We wake up again on October 7th to the threat, and everybody's all surprised. Everybody's surprised that you have thousands of students that are chanting pro-Hamas slogans. And people in my industry were not surprised because we saw this funding coming in for at least the past 15, 20 years. And the reason why they're teaching the anti-American pro-terror ideology, the appeasement of terror ideology on campus, has a lot to do with the foreign funding from Islamist terror sponsoring states.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. I have not heard about Qatar funding these programs on our college campuses, but that really helps to connect the dots to understand why that movement just manifested so quickly. And when you say that they're indoctrinating the kids in Islamization on the campuses, how can that be? Don't we have separation of church and state? Are they actually teaching them Islamic doctrine, Sharia, and other things like that, or is it just sort of this cultural, subversive stuff?
So, first of all, Qatar spends at least $1 billion a year funding the educational system in the United States. And it's not just college campuses and universities, it's K through 12. On top of that, a lot of our institutes of higher learning have partnered with the state of Qatar, and they've opened up campuses in Qatar. Northwestern, for example, has a school of journalism in Qatar where people are educated. It's an Islamist country, they educate them, against the West, and then they come back to America, and you're creating this whole, cadre of journalists who bring an anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Christian perspective to the media, pro-terror appeasement perspective to the media. And when you look at what's being taught in schools, it's not just appeasement to radical ideology, but Qatar is also funding DEI departments. Yeah. And you think this is antithetical to Sharia law, but what they understand is the more that they break up the fabric of our society, which is Judeo-Christian, based on biblical values, based on the family, the more that they destroy our morality from within, the easier it will be then to destroy the country as a whole.
Yeah, there's definitely an alliance between the hard left in America and Muslim radicals and Muslim radicalism. And they're strange bedfellows, aren't they? But they have one thing in common, the hatred of Israel and the United States.
That's right, and it's the oldest trick in the book, and I think that is the real brain virus, right? Jew hatred. It makes people crazy. It makes people do things that are against their own self-interest. And you see this cognitive dissonance, right? Gays for Palestine. When if you are not gay and you set foot in Gaza, they would murder you.
Yeah.
And the only way you can have these two contradictory positions at the same time is if you have a brain virus, and that brain virus is anti-Semitism, it's Jew hatred, and it's completely irrational, and it destroys societies.
Well, here we are. We're at MFest. On the opening night, Ben Shapiro spoke very forcefully, basically threw down the gauntlet, saying the conservative movement cannot tolerate this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic strain that has emerged, calling out Candace Owens. I don't know if he named Tucker by name, but it was obvious he was talking about local. And Tucker Carlson spoke that night as well. And what do you make of Tucker's comments? Were you able to hear them?
Yes. So I'll say this first and foremost. There is an attempt to divide the right.
Yes.
And we need to push back against that. I think what Ben's points were, we have to be unified, that America first does not mean America alone, that this whole concept of isolationism has been tested in history and failed. If we want to remain a global power, we have a responsibility. We have to respect the country, the Jewish state that is fighting on the front lines of the war against radical Islam, which is at war with the West, not just at war with Israel.
Right.
He called out those who traffic in conspiracy theories and untruths, and he also called into question why we are cozying up with Qatar and Islamist ideologies.
Yeah.
That's not in our interest. And he did so in the spirit of open debate and dialogue. And what happened next proved his point exactly. Tucker, Candace, Steve Bannon did not address the points on an intellectual way. They called out Ben, and they attacked Ben, and they again trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes and said Ben is a cancer. They said, Israel firsters, Jews don't care about America, they only care about Israel. And that's not what AmFest is about. That's not what Turning Point is about. That's not what Charlie Kirk was about. Charlie Kirk was about taking ideas and debating them. And what I think has happened here is really almost like a high school spat of personalities, and it has completely distracted us from the point of why we are all here, to flesh out the truth and to flesh out ideas and to debate ideas and have a marketplace of ideas, and not to attack each other personally. But unfortunately, that's what the response was, and it's a huge diversion because we have a real enemy here, and the strategy is to divide the Conservative Party, to pit Christians against Christians, Christians against Jews. In the meantime, we're not paying attention to the very real threat, and that is radical Islam.
Absolutely. So at the city of David, outside the old city of Jerusalem in Israel, there's a plaza, and on the wall in this plaza, where it's sort of an area for people to have a picnic, sit, eat, whatever, there's a plaque, and I don't know if you've seen it or not, but this plaque actually has the seal of the United States on it, as well as that of the ambassador to Israel, the American ambassador. And it says, to paraphrase it basically acknowledges the common link between America and Israel, because the principles upon which America was founded are found in the Bible and originate in Israel. And it's really, I think, recognizes the city of David as an historical heritage site for America, not Israel, which I think is the most wonderful and amazing recognition there. And so I want to ask you, how America, can you comment on how America and Israel are actually linked ideologically and as a matter of principle, not just from strategic interests? I want to talk about strategy as well, but just as bedfellows in the cause of freedom and truth in the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the greatest partnership that the modern world has seen is that between the Jewish community and the Christian community. And that is why we have America, right? There is a reason why our founding fathers were Talmud scholars. And we rise together and we fall together. And this country, as you said, is based on biblical values, Judeo-Christian values. And so this spiritual partnership is what our enemies are trying to break. And as long as we work together, and as a Jewish person, the honest truth is that we cannot survive as a minority in the diaspora without faithful Christians, without Christians who believe in the covenant, without Christians who understand the authentic Jewish Jesus, without Christians who understand that the role Israel plays when Israeli parents are sacrificing their children so that they can defeat radical Islamists who scream death to America, so that we can live here and put our kids to bed every night in safety. And it's one of mutual respect and obviously great allyship. I don't think it's historically unprecedented, the partnership and the allyship that these two countries have together. And so, when people claim that America has to be isolationist, that we should not help our allies in the Middle East, it's pretty obvious that they haven't learned from history, right? That they want to put blinders on, they want to ignore that other people have declared wars against us together. Islamists don't distinguish between Christians and Jews. To them, we're all infidels. So we have to maintain this partnership, and anybody who preaches division between our two communities, we should be very wary of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what would happen, imagine with me for just a minute, what would happen if America did not support Israel at this point in history and basically abandoned Israel and turned against them? What would the ramifications of that be?
Well, again, the honest truth is I'm not worried about Israel, right? The Torah says in every generation they will come up against us. There will be Jew haters, there will be Hamans, there will be Amaleks, there will be ISIS, there will be Nazis. In every generation historically, the Jewish people against all odds have defeated our enemies. And the Bible, the most prophesized event in the Bible is the return of the Jewish people to Israel, and Israel will not be taken away from us. I am worried about America. I am worried about Christianity. I am worried about my Christian brothers and sisters in Europe who are being attacked, with Christmas markets being attacked, Christian bookstores being attacked. I'm worried about the Christians in Nigeria that are being locked in churches and burnt alive. I am worried about the Christians in Sudan. I am worried about the Christian community in Egypt, the Copts. I'm worried about the Christian communities that are being wiped out throughout the Middle East. And I am worried that my Christian brothers and sisters don't know that they are at war. They don't know who they are at war with, and they are confused as to who their allies are. Israel will always help America. Whether America continues to help Israel is yet to be seen. I believe it will. I think the bond is unbreakable. I think that the conservative movement is strong. I think that Republican Party platforms are still something that the majority of the Republicans believe in. But there are elements, as I said earlier, that are trying to divide us, that are trying to set up Israel as some sort of scapegoat and the reason why we have all of our problems. And then that seeps into political dialogue. For example, the whole call for a two-state solution, right? Creating another Islamist state in a sea of failed Islamist dictatorships is not a solution to anything. We actually tried that. You have to be completely historically ignorant to keep advocating for a two-state solution. We tried that. Transjordan, right? That was part of the original mandate to be the state of Israel for the Jewish people. When the Arabs declared war against Israel when it was founded, Israel was cut in half, and Transjordan was given to the Hashemites, and they have a Hashemite kingdom, and they don't treat Palestinians very nicely there. We already divided it, and now we're being told that we have to continue to divide it, continue to whittle down Israel to appease an Islamist, terrorist, radical ideology, and then they will stop hating us. But I've gone personally. I went to Jenin. I've been to Ramallah. I've been to Tulkarm, Nablus, and I've been to Gaza. I was the third civilian ever to be given permission by the American government to go into Gaza during the conflict. And I've seen evil firsthand with my own eyes. And the only way there will be peace in the Middle East is if the Islamists stop teaching their children to love death and to love life. When the schools and the textbooks and the imams and the political leaders, the religious leaders, and often sometimes parents are teaching their children that their sole duty is to engage in a violent jihad against the West, then there will be conflict and war.
Yeah.
And America's isolationist policy is ignorant to that threat. And when they scream globalize the intifada, what they mean is to bring that radical ideology and terror support to America, to destroy America.
You know, it's the appeasement mindset. It reminds me of World War II Europe, when those who didn't want to face reality thought, well, just give Hitler this territory. Well, you know, this is enough. Peace in our day. And they didn't realize the monster that they were facing was a spiritual monster, actually, and that it was never going to quit until it obliterated. Took all of Europe, and I think it ultimately wanted more. And it's the same thing with Islam, isn't it? If we were to, America were to abandon Israel, it's not like that the Islamic radicals would be satisfied. It would be, okay, great, we've won now. They would actually be emboldened to even do more violence against America and Western Christian nations. Do you agree with that?
100% correct.
Yeah.
They see Israel as a little America,
Right.
as the American outpost.
Yeah.
And their goal is, again, it's not a political war, it's a theological war that we're in. And you only need to turn on, Al-Aqsa TV or Hezbollah TV or go into mosque, and what they are preaching is the reestablishment of the caliphate throughout the world and the establishment of Sharia law. And you want to know what America's going to look like if it abandons Israel? Go take a look at Belgium. Go take a look at France. Go take a look at what's happening in England right now. You have Sharia cities within cities. You have the police are even too afraid to go into these Sharia no-go zones. And it's happening here. We have Sharia compliant schools that are being set up throughout our country. Look at Dearborn, Michigan.
Right.
Dearborn, Michigan is what America is going to look like if it abandons its conservative values and if it abandons its Judeo-Christian roots.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's comment a little bit about the idea, you sort of came close to it, but of replacement theology. So Tucker Carlson said that to him Zionism is heresy. I wrote an article saying basically, no, Tucker, Zionism is heresy, it's actually orthodoxy. A proper understanding of the covenant that the Bible covenants leads to the support of Israel. Do you have any thoughts on that subject, and what's your response to that idea that Zionism is heresy?
Well, Christian Zionism, he said, I hate Christian Zionists more than I hate anyone else. This is a war. He has declared war on Christians. And he and others are spreading a very dangerous narrative. And I think it's akin to the narrative of an antichrist. It is absolutely evil. And the narrative goes like this. God no longer has a covenant with the Jews, right? The Jews are no longer in God's favor. And God has broken his promise. And the reason why it's so dangerous, and I just want to explain also the difference between a covenant and a contract, because it's very important to understand, right? Men make contracts, right? Till death do us part. But God doesn't die. A covenant is a promise that only God can make, and it lasts forever. And if you say that there is no longer the covenant, if you challenge the covenant, what you are saying is that God is a liar. God cannot be trusted to keep his promises. And when you say God cannot be trusted and God is a liar, you hate God. And that is the very dangerous message that's being spread right now.
Yeah. So I talk about this often, but from the Christian perspective, the New Testament asks the very question: has God forsaken those whom he foreknew? The Apostle Paul says, God forbid. And he goes on to explain the process that we're in. The idea that God has replaced Israel with the church is not true. In actuality, we are grafted into the covenant of Abraham Gentile believers, God says to Abraham, through you all nations of the earth will be blessed. And it was just from a Christian perspective, the promise was that the Messiah would come through Abraham and the children of Israel and the Word of God, and that's what's happened. And in the end of times, through His power and wisdom, God will somehow bring all of it together in unity. And when Christ returns, we believe that's what will happen. And what blows my mind, what I can't understand, is how people think that, that somehow the Jews today are cut off. It's actually completely ridiculous. So I agree with you 100%. It's time for us to stand up and stand up boldly against this. When the heresy is actually coming from from the replacement theology people, not the other way around.
Of course, but how do you explain against all odds
the rebirth of Israel?
Not just the survival of the Jewish
Yes,
people.
yes. No, you can't.
I mean, we survived the Greeks, we survived the Egyptians, we survived the Romans, we survived the Nazis, we survived communism, we survived, the Holocaust and the attack of the Arab states over and over again. We are 0.02% of the entire population. It's only through a miracle, only through God's covenant, that the Jewish people have been preserved. And why? It's to bring a light, to bring people closer to God, which is why the partnership between the Jewish community and the Christian community is a blessed partnership, which is why those who bless Israel are blessed themselves. And we see it with our own eyes. How did Israel even survive October the 7th? All of the surrounding nations were supposed to attack Israel at the same time, and yet that didn't happen. If you don't believe in miracles, it's impossible not to believe in miracles when you see, historically the survival of the Jewish people, the founding of the Jewish state after 2,000 years, prophesized in the Bible.
It's never happened before. There's never been a nation that was taken into exile for 1,700, 1,800 years, or even 500 years, and not cease to exist. And not only that, but the Hebrew language was revived as a spoken language after 1,500 years. It's an absolute miracle. The whole process prophesied multiple times in the Bible, especially the one is in Isaiah that says that they will be brought back to the land a second time. We have the Babylonian captivity restored, but the second time, that is what happened in 1948. It's absolutely a miracle.
It's not just surviving, it's thriving. And look at all of the blessings that come out of Israel, the cures for diseases, the technological and scientific advancements, and again, the blessing that really the Jewish state is again on the front lines of the war against extremism and Islamism. We cannot minimize that. The share of the defense technology that's happening, the intel sharing that's happening. If America didn't partner with Israel, right, we wouldn't have the intel that Israel gives us on a daily basis so that we keep our community safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people learn more about what you're doing? Maybe take advantage of, like if we have any Jewish people in our viewing audience or who know Jews who need legal help, how can they get in touch with you?
So you can always follow me on social media. On Instagram, it's Real Brooke Goldstein, and on X, it's Goldstein Brooke.
Okay.
There's also the lawfareproject.org and the End Jew Hatred Movement. Go online, search it, you'll see our websites. But it's not just the Jewish community. Woo, okay. that we're assisting. When the most important thing, and what really the Torah gave the world is the rule of law, the 10 Commandments. And the most important thing that we do at the Lawfare Project is ensure that the rule of law is upheld, that there are consequences when people violate the civil rights of minority communities, of the Jewish community, of Israelis. And because we set precedents at law, those precedents benefit everyone. So we engage in impact litigation, civil rights litigation. We've actually learned a lot from our Christian brothers and sisters who have been using the courts for way longer than we have to ensure that there is protection, there is religious freedom, there is freedom of association and freedom of speech and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's what we do, and that's how you can find us.
That's fantastic. And you had mentioned that you have at least one book. Tell us about how people and find what you've done?
So my first book is called Lawfare, The War Against Free Speech, and it basically outlines how the legal system is being abused in an effort to silence and punish those who are brave enough to speak publicly about the national security threat that radical Islam poses. And my book that's coming out is called End Jew Hatred, a Manual for Mobilization.
Wow, I got to get that one. Okay, awesome.
I got to finish writing it.
Oh, well, send me an advance copy or something.
Then, yeah, October 7th happened, and obviously we had to go back to the drawing board a little bit because the entire world changed after that, but it's coming soon.
I just want to say, check out the Lawfare Project, and also remember Brooke and her organization in your prayers. This is something that I believe is a really valuable, strategic thing that she's doing, and we need to get behind it and support it. We are in this together, the fight for freedom, the fight for truth, the fight to preserve the Word of God in our culture. And so take time to do that today. I know it'll be a blessing to them.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming
I'm
on
so
Truth and
honored to
Liberty.
be here with you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.